The Evil Dead game was incredibly fun. Keyword was, as the game has very quickly met its end. The developers have since stated that they will not be developing further content for the game, but that doesn't mean the game is dead, surely. Well, unfortunately there are a multitude of other issues that this game has faced since its release that has led to its player base getting Thanos snapped. Why do I bring this all up? Because I want to shed some light on a game that I feel had such incredible potential to be a massive success, and could perhaps have even rivaled the likes of Dead by Daylight. I thought this game was such good fun that I even got some close and even stubborn friends into playing it with me. Unlike Overwatch, which I flat out just lost all respect for, the Evil Dead game was not heavy on microtransactions, and seemed to have a dedicated development team. So today I wanted to talk about what made the game so great, why it had such potential, and what I believe ultimately led to its downfall. Just a small disclaimer before I begin, I'm no games expert. Any of the things I mention in this video are mostly just opinions and not stated facts. It's things I heard from word of mouth and similarly. That does not mean what I have to say is invalid, however, as I sunk many an hour into this game and I feel I have a right to talk about a game I am truly passionate about. So let's get into it. Firstly, what was the Evil Dead game? What was so fun about it? Well, it's an asymmetric 5-player game with one Kandarian demon and a team of 4 survivors, all of which are characters from the Evil Dead franchise. The plot is simple. A Kandarian demon has been released, and it's the job of the 4 survivors to fight off the hordes of Deadites and send the demon back from whence it came. 4 survivors versus one powerful force. Where have I heard that concept before? For those unaware of what the Evil Dead game was, allow me to summarize what goes on during a standard match. For those familiar with the mechanics of the game, feel free to skip to the timestamp shown on screen, or skip the chapter entirely. I won't be going over every mechanic, such as Pink F, Resurrections, or the special skills of each class, just the base gameplay loop of a standard game. Now then, there are 4 stages to a standard match. The first is the fetch/looting phase. Survivors must collect and gather loot in the forms of weapons and equipment, as well as hunt for 3 pieces of a map at 3 randomized locations across the game map. This map will then reveal the locations for the next objective. This phase is important as the longer it takes for the survivors to find the map, the more time the demon has to power themselves up. The demon's mission in this phase is to set traps, collect infernal energy, and level up their stats in an in-game menu. The more energy and points they collect, the more of a threat they become to the survivors. The second phase is to obtain the Kandarian dagger and the lost pages of the Necronomicon. This phase takes place in 2 different locations on the map, and once triggered, will cause a timer to start. This is very much a capture the flag scenario where the survivors must remain in range of the objective and it's the demon's job to contest them. The demon gets significantly stronger during this phase and when close to the triggered objective, allowing them to truly give the 4 survivors a fight for their lives in a push and pull kind of tug of war. Once the survivors have obtained the lost pages and the dagger, they can head towards the Dark Ones to banish them with the newly obtained Kandarian dagger. The demon is once again more powerful during this phase, and needs to try and fight them off the Dark Ones by any means necessary. If the survivors successfully banish the Dark Ones, then finally comes the climax. The final fight at the end of it all. The survivors must protect the Necronomicon from the demon. The demon's mission is to either kill all 4 survivors, or they can destroy the book. If either condition is met, then the demon will win the game. If the survivors defend the book until the timer runs out, then it is a victory for the survivors. Whew, that was a lot. Did it sound like a lot? Well, I assure you, it's honestly pretty simple, and the game walks you through each objective with map markers and HUD elements, so you're never truly lost. So what makes this game so fun then, in my opinion? Well, what I love about the Evil Dead game is, unlike Dead by Daylight, where every decision a killer makes, every misswing, accidental misinput could cost you the entire game, and survivor gameplay just boils down to holding down a button for 90 seconds. In the Evil Dead game, I am always actively doing something. I am never just sat around waiting for the demon to chase me or fight me. You see, the demon isn't actually a physical presence. It's an entity almost. An invisible force. A mastermind spawning AI-controlled minions, devising strategies and using the strengths of the team against them. I like to describe it as PvEVP. You do have the ability to possess units that you spawn as a demon, as well as survivors for a more targeted and powerful assault, but ultimately you're not partaking in the fighting a majority of the time. This means as either side, I am constantly doing something. As survivor, I'm actively looting, defending, and fighting a multitude of enemies in various waves, even stylish ones. And as the demon, I am being the biggest shitbag I can possibly be to a team of 4 random people. The point I want to draw your attention to is where I said that I am constantly doing something. I am always in the action most of the time. The game is very well paced, as there are moments of downtime between objectives that allow for a moment to breathe and consider your next move, be it looting some more or gathering energy and leveling up. The game is not designed in such a way that the demon can just kill all 4 survivors out the starting gate and then mock you in the endgame screen. No, the demon starts off so weak that they can't even spawn portals yet to summon minions. The game builds up to a tense and climactic finale of good versus pure evil. It's chaos and mayhem and bloodshed and a push and pull between survivor and demon. It's mwah. Honestly, I love it. Now, it's not perfect, I know. I've played the game a lot, and there were scummy strats that enabled certain demons to run away with the game early that were completely unfun and uncounterable, and yeah, balance issues are expected, metas develop. It's the curse of online video games, blah blah blah. I get that, so please save those comments reminding me of the whole sweat Rieta meta as I called it, looking at you, true talent, or just how overpowered Ball was for the longest time. But at its core, the gameplay loop was so much fun and had such potential for greatness. So, why didn't it take off? If the game is this fun and had such potential as I put it, then why was it not a great success? Yeah. The first big faux pas with the Evil Dead game is that it went straight onto Epic Games first. Now, I don't know and cannot speak for the console market, but for PC players, it was Epic Games or nothing. With the reputation Fortnite has, as well as Epic Games as a company, naturally people at the time were very much against downloading the launcher, and giving their money away to the people that bought us this. There are likely other biases and opinions as to why people are anti-Epic Games, but regardless of what stance you take, there is no denying that releasing a game exclusively to Epic Games like this was bound to have significant impact. Especially since Dead by Daylight, a game that Evil Dead was compared to for so long before launch, had a thriving player base on Steam. You know, the gaming platform on PC. Would releasing the game on Steam have fixed all its issues and kept the game going on all on its own? No, of course not. There were many other problems this game had aside from that. But I strongly believe it would have been much more accessible for a lot of people. A much more sociable environment for people to connect on, and it even allowed a passerby to give this new recommended game a try. Not to mention the ability to gift people the game, Steam sales, all that stuff. It's really hard to deny the impact releasing to Steam from the start would have had on this game as a whole. Any and all of the friends I had introduced to this game had never even heard of this game before. Heck, I didn't even know that this was going to be a thing. If it wasn't for a friend recommending it to me and selling me on the idea, then I never would have played it at all. Thankfully, the gameplay, progression system, and skill expression in the game enticed me enough to want to play more. The same was true for my friends. After asking a friend for their opinion on the game, and why they felt it failed, the first thing they stated was that if it wasn't for me introducing it to them, they never would have even heard of it. When a new and hyped game is released on Steam, it is often the first thing you see on the store page. Even then, games are often recommended for you based on what you play. None of these features exist on Epic Games, and even if they do, to nowhere near the same extent. I've never seen games advertised to me, not ones that I care about. Now, I know the Evil Dead game was released on Steam more recently, however it's beyond too late now, and it doesn't even include cross-progression. My account progress is locked to my Epic Games version of the game. The only way most people knew of this game's existence was simply through being a fan of the franchise. Those who like and know the Evil Dead franchise were the ones who had heard about it, my friend being one of them. Without them, I'd never have even known of this game's existence. Now, this game was not overly graphics intensive, but it was quite graphically intensive and not always the most optimized. I was trying to run this game off an old Nvidia 970 graphics card, and for the most part it could handle it pretty well, honestly. Until the Castle Kandar map came out, and holy hell, what the hell is this frame rate? Oh my god! One of the biggest things, in my opinion, that keeps Dead by Daylight going to this day is that you can run it on almost anything. It's not a very graphically intensive game, and often not even a pretty one. And yet, how many people are playing it right now? Now, that's not to say I don't appreciate the visuals of the Evil Dead game. Now that I have a better GPU, RAM, etc., I can truly appreciate all this game has to offer. However, I think it goes without saying that there are times I played the Evil Dead game and had to stop as it just ran so poorly to the point it was unplayable. Now, obviously, one is much more graphically intensive than the other. Big deal. But I shouldn't have to have a top-of-the-range or even above mid-range setup in order to play a game that, let's be honest, I'm playing for the gameplay, not the visuals. That's not to say high-end visuals are not welcome in a game like The Evil Dead, but to be gatekept by the need to have a better setup in order to enjoy a strictly multiplayer experience is baffling to me. When the focus of your game is the gameplay, the visuals should be the afterthought. Unlike a AAA game where enhanced visuals are part of the selling point and even an expectation, in an asymmetric experience such as Dead by Daylight or the Evil Dead game, it shouldn't be the focus, as many people will be unable to play the game outright due to the limitations of their hardware. Now, I know this isn't an issue for everyone, especially for the console market, however I couldn't have been the only person to have faced an issue like this. Therefore, I feel it's worth bringing to light. Or lack thereof. Nothing spoils a game more than feeling like the people who make the game don't really care. Updates were far and few between, and often the changes they made were just awful. It often felt like what the developers listened to was always the wrong advice. Instead of trying to get a consensus from the general player base, it appeared they often listened to very specific streamers who basically wanted to turn the game into some sort of comp game, much like what DBD feels like at times. This was most prevalent during one of the worst and most unfun metas of the time that I briefly touched on earlier. Every game became the same horrendous rush to finish objectives as quickly as possible before the demon, commonly the warlord, would kill a survivor early. And yes, they were capable of doing that. This was often before the survivor had time to loot and power up, even a little bit. A certain build for that demon became quite commonplace, with the main strategy being to find and harass a survivor as early and as quickly as possible through possessing basic minions and attacking them relentlessly. This would level up the demon quickly and provide them with lots of energy to spawn another unit and do it again with no punishment or cooldown. Again, spawn possess, again, spawn possess, again, spawn possess. It was agonizing. And I know someone's just adjusted their glasses and gone,
well, actually, killing survivors is the objective of the demon, so, like, what's wrong with that?
It was the fact that there was no counterplay or punishment for abusing this strategy. Survivors' resources in relation to healing and the much-needed ammunition to counter this strategy were severely limited. And if you didn't bring the right team, luck into a strong chest with lots of pink F to power up your class, or happen upon amazing and specialized weaponry focused on your class, you were just often mowed down at the starting gate. It was miserable. The proof was in the aforementioned video I showed briefly with True Talent. Myself and a friend faced him abusing this strategy, and my god was it awful. We were so lucky to get as close as we did to winning. But what it meant was foregoing all fun and focusing solely on rushing objectives. No time to loot, no time to restock, no time to power up, no time for fun. It was objectives or nothing. It made for a really stale and miserable gaming experience, and it took months for the devs to patch it. Heck, I'm pretty sure the patch actually buffed the strategy. Thankfully, the strat was later nerfed down the line in a following patch, but it took a great deal longer than it ever should have done to do so. This also had the additional effect of leaving the game horrendously stale between updates. They were so far and few between that common problems and bugs would be left in the game for ages. Where DBD developed the kill switch function to disable the ability to play certain problematic maps, killers, or perks, the Evil Dead game had nothing of the sort. If you want to abuse a dull and unengaging strategy that just wins you the game for free, go right ahead. We'll patch the game in a couple months. So where does this all leave us? Well, I'm not entirely sure, because to my surprise, the game isn't actually dead. I was genuinely surprised to see that while I was gathering footage for this video, that there were a good number of people still playing it. Queues were an acceptable length, and matches were, horrendously unbalanced. Yeah, that's right. With a game like The Evil Dead being almost abandoned the way it has, what that has left us with is only its dedicated players. Now, there is a progression system that I know I haven't touched on, and I didn't really want to at any point in this video because at a base level it never really mattered. However, since there is going to be no further development on this game and the player base is slowly dwindling, I think it's worth touching on the fact that there is no skill-based matchmaking. Now, I come from a Dead by Daylight background, and we hate skill-based matchmaking. I won't go into too much detail about my feelings on such systems. However, it's worth bringing up here because the progression system in the Evil Dead game significantly impacts the outcome of a match. Dead by Daylight can be played at the same level, at any level. Every match is an even playing field, and the only progression in Dead by Daylight comes from the perks that you can unlock. The perks you run can change the outcome of a match, but they don't dictate its outcome. A lot of what does comes down to how you position and the decisions you make throughout the match. The Evil Dead game, however, is much more numbers-based. Every character in the game has a skill tree, and in this tree, points can be spent however you want that give you bonuses in different aspects. Every class has the same skill trees between each character of said class. However, each character has a unique ability and build that you would want to run on them. For example, Kelly is a Hunter class character, which is the class that cares a lot about damage with guns. Unlike other hunters in her class, however, that want to specialize in maxing out their gun damage, I built Kelly as a sort of hybrid between melee and range damage since she has a weapon mastery for meat hammers. Plus, her abilities already buff her gun damage. The way points are distributed in these trees makes a huge difference to a match. Unlike in Dead by Daylight where you can escape from a trial and kill all 4 survivors without any perks, the Evil Dead game is almost dependent on maxing out and optimizing your characters. Playing a match of this game against a well-spec'd demon without any points at all is almost an impossibility. And now we move on to the Prestige system, which is a system that was introduced quite late into this game's life cycle. This system provides players with an extra skill point, as well as a general buff to their base skills. Now this could just be my experience. I'm not the most well-versed demon player at all. However, I am finding myself being consistently matched up with high prestige lobbies, where the players have an incredible range of skills, weapons, and resources that I simply just can't keep up with as a relatively novice player. How on earth is a new player supposed to get into a game like this when anything they try to do is met with immediate and brutal counterplay? I played many a demon match where I simply left the game halfway through because my cooldowns were too long, and regardless of how I'd spec my demon, anything I tried to do was instantly thwarted. It was a losing game before it had begun. Skill issue on my part, I know, for sure. But the reason I left those games was not a defeatist attitude. It was being stuck in a game where no correct decision, skillful maneuver, or play would have made a single difference to the outcome of the game. I don't want to sit there in a losing match where I'm essentially just a punching bag for the survivor's amusement and benefit. Now, some people would argue that getting to a high prestige level is incredibly grindy and long-winded, and you're right, it is incredibly grindy to get a single character to prestige 5. However, the difference between 0 and high prestige, even though it's a matter of a few numbers, is genuinely night and day. I've spoken to a few people and they completely agree. The worst part about this game at the moment is the prestige system. That's not to say it's a terrible idea and that it doesn't belong in the game. It most certainly does. A progression system such as this I would go as far as to encourage. However, seeing as this game has no matchmaking system anymore, a brand new player could queue up against a squad of high prestige survivors or a prestige 5 demon and suffer through a truly miserable and heavily one-sided experience. The reason I make this video is not to be negative, surprisingly. It was to shed some light on a game I thoroughly enjoyed and even were able to get others to enjoy as well. If a game about a franchise that myself and my friends never cared about before suddenly spoke to us and gave us some really fun experiences, I felt it was worth bringing into light some more. So, is the Evil Dead game dead? Well, seeing as I can still queue for matches and have some reasonably fun games even still, not exactly. However, with the announcement of no further content to the game or much needed balance patches, not to mention the horrible new player experience, I don't see this game having much longer left to live. My wish is that this game didn't die the way it is, or perhaps even has by the time you're watching this. I'm not entirely sure what I set out to achieve by making a video like this, but I suppose my one hope is that this game is perhaps revived in some way. Perhaps a savvy team of people could take this concept and adapt it into their own game, or maybe this game makes a resurgence in some way. I'd love nothing more than to see that happen sometime in the future, so that others might experience some of the joy this game brought me and other like-minded people. But unfortunately right now we are left with a shell of what is, as opposed to what could have been. If you've made it this far into the video, do feel free to leave a like on the video and leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts about the Evil Dead game, or perhaps anything I said in this video. As I said, I'm no expert, so I'd really appreciate to hear what your opinion on the game is. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Ciao ciao!